Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Today we're going to talk about diversity in stories. Yay! We're all pretty diverse, and in many ways a little too diverse. Good job, everyone, for making the world more interesting. However, the argument here is whether or not that diversity should present itself within the media we consume, and is that a good thing? Before we get started, here's a word from my sponsor. Let me start things off by saying, I'm not the arbiter of how diverse your story should be. Have fun and let your passion flow. Don't let some random scrub on the internet ruin that for you. Personally, I enjoy very diverse stories. I want to see all kinds of characters in shapes and sizes. The ethnicity, race, gender, and whatever you could think of for the character that can play into the setting of the story. During my time away from commentary, I noticed the online discussions around this topic centered on SJWs forcing diversity in stories with a checklist from Tumblr, and diverse representation being a good thing in stories to give minority populations characters they can see themselves in. I'm going to inject some nuance here. When I look at TV shows such as Batwoman, which wears that feminist message on its sleeves with very little subtlety, I see it as cheesy and bad writing. Every piece of media has its audience, but please do not treat this as propaganda.
She-Ra was the beginning of the end of Western civilization. The original She-Ra was hotter.
Dude, it's just a cartoon. You probably never watched the original.
Shut up, commie.
I take issue with the passionless ticking of diversity boxes to fill some quota, but if you can somehow make an engaging story out of it with fleshed out characters, then congrats, you did it. If diversity is all the story has to offer, and that's the only focal point, then yes, that's bad. I can only confidently point to cases where the team behind the project are sharing news about their diverse team instead of selling people on the idea of the story. For example, that Guardian Spice trailer. So yeah, you can craft interesting stories with a cast straight out of Tumblr. Nothing about that necessarily makes a bad story. However, if you're making them all interchangeable, soulless husks of a character with surface level traits, then it all falls apart. Basically, don't make a Charlie's Angels reboot.
Hey, here's a disabled Swedish person of color.
Seriously, that thing clearly has not been properly developed. Put that back where you found it. Don't look into his eyes.
Why?
I like my fair share of icing too, but we can all agree that it goes better on some cake. It really adds a kick to that delicious cake. So make sure the ingredients are right, not too much, not too little. Don't leave it in the oven for too long, basic stuff. Afterwards, whatever topping you add to that cake is up to you. Knock yourself out. Wait, what was I talking about before this? Yes, representation. I don't oppose to that. The internet has a way of giving obnoxious people a loud voice, which can give reasonable people going about their day a false idea of how the other political side thinks about diversity in media. First, let me tell you how Star Wars ruined my life. Here's my
Microaggressions,
agenda with the downfall of what's ruined everything. One day, their agenda will sneak into your house and take everything from you. Oh, come on! I just want to watch my favorite movie! Not every piece of media needs to have a character from all over the world within it, but I welcome the diversity wherever the story calls for it. Media has the power to normalize groups of people and to let you see a culture you're unfamiliar with in a new light. Personally, I can identify with or see a part of myself in characters who aren't black men. I think it's called empathy? You can correct me if I'm wrong. However, I'd be lying if I say I don't get excited when I see a black or LGBT character being portrayed in a unique or positive way. I'd say, oh cool, I'm two of those things. Living in America and not being a cis white man, I can understand why representation matters to some people. My thoughts are, representation is good, but make sure the storytelling isn't taking a back seat. I believe people who get annoyed or put off when diversity in stories is brought up is due to some stories being ham-fisted with their delivery or putting the diversity over its storytelling. They can spot this a mile away, and so can I, so please avoid that. The bigots in this topic are in a whole other category. No piece of media is going to make them less hateful or fearful towards certain groups of people. Except maybe porn? Temporarily? Good night, Judy. And hello, Ebony. I'm going to quickly touch on this next part because it might be a while before this shows up on my channel again. So having LGBT characters in a story is a contentious topic. Why does there need to be a gay character in everything? This is just shoving their agenda in our faces. For decades, TV shows and movies in America have been portraying LGBT characters in a negative way, thrown into inaccurate or harmful character tropes, or made obscurely LGBT without explicitly saying so. The majority of non-LGBT people didn't see a problem with this because this was the status quo. LGBT is the other, a sin, a perversion. I think the problem certain people are having here is due to a cultural shift towards acceptance or at least understanding these LGBT characters who would have been laughed at, used to confirm their biases, or hidden away into the background are now being portrayed as a normal, complex human being. Most people don't actively seek out an LGBT person to talk to in person, so they're stuck with the views constructed and strengthened by their peers. I don't advise you to go to a random LGBT person to talk to about their identity because they have their own life to live, and the last thing they need is a heavy topic coming out of nowhere. It's the same reason why I wouldn't want a white liberal approaching me out of nowhere saying, "Oh, you poor black man. I am so sorry for what my people did to you. Come here, let me give you a hug." Please don't do that. Let the conversation happen naturally, and if that person wants to talk about it, you can opt in or out if you want. So, I don't mind LGBT characters being portrayed in a positive way in media, because that might be the only time people get to see them that way in their day-to-day lives. Look at Binary Rose, supporting the gay agenda being forced down our throats. Open up!
Hey, yo!
Dramatics aside, I think it's a good thing to see the diversity that humanity has to offer. We're not all going to get along, and no one ever said it was going to be easy. However diverse your characters are, creative writers and fellow artists, create something beautiful. If you can make it work, do it. In my personal opinion, whether or not a story delivers on its premise matters the most. How effective it was depends on the person consuming it. This isn't to say those who critique it or explore the themes of the story through an ideological lens are in the wrong, because nothing is above criticism, and it's interesting to see how a story supports or deconstructs ideological worldviews. The kind of content that makes my eyes roll back into my head is the surface level 10-minute rants on a story for the sole purpose of being sensational. You're not exploring the story itself, but rather use it as a proxy to attack the ideology you think it represents. I get it, we all gotta eat, and that stuff makes money, but that content just isn't for me. Anyways, I gotta go. Be nice to one another, and take care of yourselves.